Hello and welcome back. This is Paolo, your host, and this is another very interesting episode of Conversations in Artificial Intelligence. So before going any further, if you're new to the channel, it is an honor and privilege to have you here. If you're coming back, thank you so much for your trust and putting your trust on us. Today, it's a very interesting episode, and the reason is that we're going to take a look to the field of finding correlations between social behavior and economic, impactful, business value driving factors. And with us today is the CTO of a very interesting Silicon Valley company, Grandata, is Martin. Hello, Martin. How are you today?
Hi, Paolo. Thanks for the introductions and thanks for having me in your series of talks.
So before we go any further, tell our audience where you are right now.
Right now, I'm in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I go back and forth from Buenos Aires to the San Francisco office. So nowadays, Grandata has an office in San Francisco and Buenos Aires. We also have like an office in Mexico and Spain. But now I'm in Buenos Aires, enjoying the weather here. It's summer.
One thing I wanted to introduce our audience is that Grandata is a company that has lots of academic collaborations, lots of R&D going on. And in order to build a company like this, I think the founders have to have a certain type of, personalities, have to have certain type of interests. How would you describe those interests to your teammates when you were a high school graduate?
I was very interested in science at that time. I was interested in physics. I was interested in mathematics. I was involved in the high school Olympiads in math and physics. All the things that I was discussing all the time with my friends had to do with solving math problems, like physics problems. I was very involved in the scientific world from an early age. I think the founders of Grandata, I'm one of the three founders of Grandata, we share this scientific background. Matt Travisano, he's one of the partners in Grandata. He has a background in physics, and Nicolas Goulou, he has a background in engineer. I myself have a background in mathematics and also in economics. I have also had a passion in understanding how things work and building things. I think that's one thing that distinguishes my background from early age.
What were the stages that led you from whatever you were doing before to find Grandata? Was there like some moment of inspiration, some kind of problem that you were bothered about? How did it happen?
Basically, before Grandata, after I finished college, I worked as a researcher at the International Monetary Fund, and I was working in developing different debt structure financial instruments. I was working in a group at the International Monetary Fund, which was interested in understanding this instrument, not based on information or data from each country, but related to other countries. So we were building like social networks among countries. It was a very innovative way of looking at this problem. At the same time, I met with Matt Travisano, which is one of the partners of Grandata, and he was interested in solving epidemics, or he was studying the SARS epidemics at that time, building social networks and how the social networks can explain the growth or the evolution of these epidemics. Like we were much younger than today, and we wanted to build a company based on our interests. Our interests were studying like social network behaviors from different sides. That's when we can join forces and start a business with social network analytics as the core technology or the core algorithms for what we wanted to do and our passions. And when we thought about different industries, internet was already for the mass adoption. We are talking about like 2006. Internet for us was something that was already taken, even though it was still new. We thought that going into the telecommunication industry was kind of a place where not many of these things were thought that way. Like people in the telecommunication industry were solving a lot of problems, but they were never thinking about how to solve problems related to the networks they have into their system. So the first time we started working with businesses was with the telecommunication companies and going through the CDRs data, the coded records, the communication like voice calls, SMS, and trying to understand the behavior of this data, how people relate to each other, and building models on top of that. With that core technology or core algorithms, afterwards we thought about building a product, and when we thought about building a product, we introduced one new partner to our company. It's Nicolas Coulou, who provided us like a background from the corporate world, and also we raised money from venture capitalists.
So tell us a little bit about when you came to Silicon Valley. Like, it was immediately, it took some time?
It took us some time. I think on one side, we thought we didn't need money to grow a business. We were very naive, and we wanted to do it organically. Afterwards, like after 3-4 years or 5 years almost, we discovered it was impossible to grow like a business the way we wanted to grow it, and we wanted to build. We were very sure we wanted to be a big business. And definitely we discovered it was impossible without raising capital. We are originally from Argentina, like the founders are originally from Argentina. In Argentina, the investment, like the venture capitalists or the angel investors at all rounds, it's not very common here. So we thought that the US, it was the place where all these venture capitalists were funding companies. All the ecosystem existed there. And when we discovered this and when we learned this, we thought that for being of interest to this venture capital, we needed a foot in this market. And we decided Silicon Valley was where everything is happening in terms of venture capitalists. There are other places, of course, like in Boston, New York, but we thought we were foreigners. It was for us the same to move to Chicago or to move to any other place than Silicon Valley. And that's when we started the company in the US in 2013. So probably 5 years after we started Binaria and 1.5 years after we founded Grandata, we moved the company to the US.
It's not typical of Silicon Valley, but it happens. So like a company gets funded in the past and then it stays alive for a number of years, and then it kind of has an inflection as it comes here and it develops. Let's look at what Grandata does from a customer viewpoint. Like, what is the value, the economic value that Grandata brings to the table?
The value proposition in Grandata, it has to do with empower companies or empower people to monetize on their data assets. For companies, what we try to do is trying to empower them so they can be leveraging on all the data assets that they have in a way that they position them in a competitive scenario where these traditional companies, like the ones we work with, are in the traditional sectors like the communication sector or the banking sector, retail sector, can compete at the same level with technology companies like the Google, the Amazon, the Facebook, the Apples of the world, right? That they data and they apply technology to create value out of the raw data. And that's our value proposition: empower these companies or empower people to get much bigger value out of the data that is generated.
Let's look at the telecommunication industry. What empowering means in that context. Like, let's try to visualize a real case. And how is that different? Let's say that Tata Consulting or Infosys Consulting, there are big data consulting firms out there.
At first, when we started working with the telecommunication companies, and we were working just with telecommunication companies, we were offering like this, our value proposition was not, maybe at the beginning was different from other companies. It was innovative maybe in the algorithms, it was more innovative in the technology. But as time went by, a lot of things were kind of converging. So at some point in time, we thought that it was much more profound and a much better proposition to be creating an ecosystem, not just solving a problem with the algorithms, but creating an ecosystem for solving problems. So what we do today in Grandata is we integrate first, at the very beginning, we integrate data from many different places. So when we work with a telecommunication company, nowadays we don't work alone with the telecommunication company. We work with a telecommunication company, but on top of that, we work with a bank or we work with a retailer. And we also work with third-party data. It could be third-party publicly available data. It could be third-party private data. So nowadays, our business model has the telecommunication business in its core of the business model. So the telecommunication companies are nowadays data partners. They provide the data to Grandata, and after what we do is we building this ecosystem, we bring clients into the table. It could be banks, it could be retailers. We integrate the data from these clients to the data it's provided by the telco. And in this data integration, we end up with a much bigger and richer data set to afterwards be able to apply all these different algorithms that we have developed in the years with our own resources or working together with collaborations with universities or institutions across the world. So for instance, just to mention like an example, we provide an innovative way for banks to give them customers who are loyal to spending behaviors, but based not only on the spending patterns that they can be seen within the customer base within the bank of the things they do with the credit cards or with the debit cards or the different things that are easily seen by the bank, but also provide like different ways to kind of end up with similar type of behavior. So we discover like a big correlation between social behavior and spending behavior. So how we can go from the social behavior that one can experience with your telecommunication provider in terms of the voice calls, the SMS, the texting, so on and so forth, and how that behavior in some sense it's also representing in the way you behave with your spending. It could be the way you are loyal to brands or the way you are an overspender or an underspender. So all these things are very well understood when you think on the behaviors that people have socially and with the social interactions.
Let's try to look at things this way, before Grandata and after Grandata. So there was a bank that is trying to sell some product or is trying to give some promotion to loyal customers. So what was it doing before Grandata and what is the bank doing after Grandata algorithms? And how do you measure the impact of Grandata algorithms?
Before Grandata, the bank was able to do all these things very well done for the closed market. And the closed market, I mean for the customer base of the bank. Then if the bank wants to go for the open market or the non-customers of the bank, where the bank doesn't have lots of information on those people. Basically, nowadays, they have to rely in third-party data. They can buy data from different data providers, or they can go and run campaigns in different companies. They can run campaigns in Facebook. They can run campaigns with Google. The thing here is that what we provide, it's the bank already has lots of information on their customers. The telco, the telecommunication companies, they know a lot about a lot of people because they have in their database not only the information of their customer, but also information of their non-customers. So what we provide is a way to work with this integrated data set where the bank can leverage on their knowledge from their customer base. So when you integrate data from the bank with data from the telco and other sources that we use, the bank gets power from the data that they already know, and they can extrapolate or they can start using that data to know things from the open market. So nowadays, for instance, one product has to do with loyalty. So the bank with the customer base, it's very easy for them to know if a customer it's loyal to a brand or not to some extent because they know their consumptions with the credit cards or debit cards. But they basically have two problems. One, it's that they don't see all the information even from the customers because nowadays people have like multiple credit cards, so they only see transactions when they use the credit card from their bank. So the loyalty index that they can calculate, it's biased to the usage of the credit card. If it's a credit card that the person has a primary credit card or as a secondary or not. But the information that comes from the telecommunication company gives the bank much broader information from the person. So the person, whenever he makes a phone call, whenever he texts anyone, all the behavioral patterns that he shows there, if you find a way that we have found a way to correlate that social behavior and try to see if that social behavior has an impact on a spending behavior that a person can afterward show with their transaction habits. It's very powerful for these companies because it's getting information from a place that's more ubiquitous, and it doesn't depend on if you are a transactor with that particular credit card. It just depends on your typical human behavior. If you talk with a certain amount of people, how your people you communicate with, how stable is your ego network or your friends, your family, your coworkers. And that tells a lot on the behaviors of the person. And nowadays it has proven, and we have proven that the social behavior is the best predictor in terms of the spending behavior. Other than you can build a model trying to predict if a person is going to be loyal to a brand or not, on maybe some psycho characteristic. And the explanatory power of the social variables trying to predict the spending habits are much bigger than trying to build models, other features. And I think that's where a lot of the value comes from.
Basically, the bank has partial information about the behavior of a customer, but with the mobile data in your algorithm, you can make prediction on what is likely to be the future behavior of a customer. So how does the bank drives economic value out of this? Like once they can predict that you're going to buy a house or you're not going to buy a house, that you're going to buy, that you this month you're going to overspend your salary or you're going to save $1,000. What do they do with that?
So they use it for many different purposes. One of the main purposes has to do with using for selling to new customer or doing cross-selling with existing customers. They also use this information to retain customers, or they also use some of this information to create a scoring on new prospects. The typical scenario is where they run campaigns with this data. They run acquisition campaigns, or they run a scoring for prospects in terms of risk analysis. They check what works best. If using our information and what extra value adds for instance, in terms of acquisition, reduces the cost of acquisition of customers, or maybe if they are attracting customers or new customers that afterwards the default rate it's lower if they use our risk score in complement to what they typically use. And basically they do those kind of calculation. They do this business sense. Our typical engagement is where everything wins in this situation, right? The data partner, the telco wins because we are revenue sharing what we get from our client. Maybe the client could be a bank, so we revenue share with the telco some part of what the bank pays for our product. The bank is also happy because they could acquire customers cheaper, or they could acquire customers with our risk score that they were not previously available for the bank because they didn't have a way to distinguish good payers from bad payers. And we're also happy because get some portion of the revenue.
So you said that, I like to go into the technology, the point, but you said also that you want to empower end consumers to monetize or their data assets. Can you elaborate on that concept? What does it mean for an end consumer to monetize their data asset?
I have to go maybe to, nowadays in Grandata, we have different business units. One business unit has to do with a business-to-business solution. So it's helping these big corporations to monetize on their data. Then we have another business unit has to do with providing solutions to people, or providing a way for people to be able to make money out of the data they generate. So nowadays, big companies like Facebook, for instance, makes lots of money from our data, and we don't see any of that money. We have the capacity, the possibility to use a Facebook platform, but we don't get money, right? So what we provide in one of the business units that we have in Grandata, it's called Whipson. We provide an ecosystem which has to do with an application for people like end users, like you, Paolo, or myself, where people can sell in a marketplace the data they generate. So this ecosystem has different players, where in this marketplace, there are data sellers, as you and me, who can monetize on the data they generate, location data, different types of behavior data. It could be financial data, it could be health applications data. And then you have like another participant in the data marketplace who are like the data buyers, who are interested in getting our data. But the value proposition here is not having intermediaries in the process. If you have a data buyer who is interested in data from a data seller, he can go to this marketplace and he can pay the owner of the data and the people who generate the data and get the data directly from them, like getting the consent from them, all the communications without any intermediaries. So it's this one of the business units we have. It's called Whipson. It's an application that you have to download and you can start like making money out of your data.
What stage is that application at this point? Is it in prototyping stage? Is it in a market launch, early stage? So I'd be interested to understand, how the public is receiving and perceiving such an application, because you're right to say that Facebook is selling our data. Google is doing much more than that, probably. But in a way, we do not have to make a conscious decision. We kind of tell ourselves, maybe it's not me. Instead, with an application like yours, yes, you get the money, but you have to make also your conscious decision that you're going to give your data out. So somebody's basically spying on you. So be curious to know where it is at in terms of adoption and what are you seeing? Like, what are the type of psychology or individuals that are prone to adopt that type of technology?
We are building it's a decentralized marketplace. So the technology behind is based on blockchain. It has also to do where we don't want to create with this new monster, right? It's not that we are creating a new Facebook from the architectural point of view, from the philosophical point of view. So this decentralized application based on blockchain technology has a utility token to be able to transact your data. Nowadays, the application it's already there. It's already alive. You can download the application from the Play Store. For Android, you can download the application. It's running nowadays only in 4 countries. It's running in Argentina, Uruguay, Spain, and the United Kingdom. So if you are in any of those countries, you can download the application and you can start monetizing on your data. It's true that you have to make a conscious decision there. But at the same time, it's true that there are some things that you do with the application that for the user, it's much easier to understand what's going on behind the application. So we build this application with 4 pillars in mind. One has to do with transparency, where the person in an easy way has an understanding on what's going on with the data. If they are going to be selling the data, what their data is going to be used for. With many of these big corporations like Facebook, Google, and others use their data, but you don't know what they're doing with their data. Or maybe if they have some terms of services, they are longer than the Constitution. It's very difficult that anyone reads that. So other pillar that we have is to create a fair application or a fair marketplace. If it's your data, it should be your money. So if you are getting an offer for your data, you have the option to decide if you want to share your data or not, because you are reading very clear what they're going to be doing with your data in a simple way, in a short way, understandable way. And at the same time, you can decide, okay, they are going to pay me this much for my data. I want to sell my data for that amount of money or not. Also, there's a big chunk having to do with the control. Many times you enter some of these systems and you provide data and it's easy to go in, but it's very difficult to go out. In this, we feel that the control has to be all the time in your power. So if you want to go in and you want to go out, it has to be very simple. And the last part has to do with anonymity. So if you want to remain anonymous, you have the option to do so. And if you don't care about your anonymity, you can also reveal your persona, reveal your identity. But nowadays, the application we launched in these 4 countries. This was done like 1 month. It was November 1st. So we already have like a bunch of users, 10,000 users of our application. It's very early. And already like over 1 million data transactions. Nowadays, users, of course, are early adopters. As these things, I think you have to create like an understanding of people, what they can do with the application. You have to communicate, you have to evangelize. We are seeing that people download the application. We are not doing so far a big effort in marketing, but there is a lot of mouth-to-mouth communication that's going on, and people are downloading the application. We have a Telegram channel for Webzone. It's very popular, and people are very happy that this application exists for the usage.
So I have two options for you. One is either you bring it to the United States, or I had to move to Argentina to use it.
No, you can also go to UK, Spain, or Uruguay, or Argentina. Argentina is a possibility. For sure, we see that we build this as global application. I think it's not only going to be for these 4 countries, but the application has to grow.
For the techies that follow us, let's look a little bit on the technology here, because it seems pretty interesting. Let's narrow down to a couple, 1 or 2 of the most use cases. But you have algorithms that shows that based on a certain social behavior, you can predict economic factors. So for example, in one of your papers, I read that based on who you're talking to, you can infer the income of the other person. Or based on the time of the day, you can infer where people are going. Can you talk about these algorithms? What is special with them? What it is that we can do today that we could not do yesterday? And third, what is the impact of infrastructures in your ability to predict today? I want to understand if these algorithms are special on their own, and how the technology ecosystem has helped them to work on large data.
The technology has helped a lot. The commoditization of technology and the possibility that even companies are at an early stage can go and access this big infrastructure at a reasonable price. I think that has helped a lot, because all this data we are talking about, it's a lot of data. Like imagine having data from a telecommunication company. You have data from all the phone calls or the SMS or the browsing that's done with the smartphone. And also you have a lot of mobility data. So you have many different...
What are we talking about? It's for a typical, let's say you run an algorithm to make a prediction on, let's say, the people in a city, what they're going next, or what is the income. Buenos Aires, I don't know, it's what, 3 million, 4 million inhabitants. What is the size of the data that you have to analyze for, a prediction like this in a city of 3-4 million inhabitants?
A city with 3 million people, where we have telecommunication data, where you have bank data and some other third parties data, you are talking about several terabytes of data. Maybe you reach hundreds, or a few hundreds of terabytes of data. You need a lot of also historical data, because a lot of these behaviors are easy to predict, because human behavior is very periodic, but you need this historical data. So it's not that you can work with 1 day of data. Maybe you will need at least 3 months of data. So it ends up adding quite rapidly, because nowadays, even if you are not texting or you are not doing a phone call, your device it's generating a lot of online data automatically, and those data is not only where you are browsing or where the application is connecting to what server and doing what, but also where that was located. So you have a lot of information, like geo-localized information. That's one thing that technology allows us, for companies like our size, to be able to access this technology's infrastructure. Something that maybe 30 years ago or 20 years ago, only very big corporations had the money for buying these servers or this super powerful infrastructure. Nowadays, you can not only buy your own infrastructure at a cheap price, but also you can rent in the cloud for a reasonable amount, like the elastic space that you need for your particular algorithms or your particular service. So that's one key issue. And I think the other things related to our algorithms, or the innovation related to the algorithms, one of the most basic ingredients there is having access to this particular data set. There are not very many companies that have access to a lot of data that comes from very different places, like telecommunication, plus banks, plus retail, other data sources that are also available. Very important also to mention that this data that we work with, it's anonymous data. We don't have any way to identify people. So PII information is stripped out of the data set. Everything that could be PII is hashed or it's encrypted or it's removed from the data set. So we don't have a way to identify a person from the data we get and with the data we work. But I think that's one of the key components. It has to do with the particular and very rich data set that we have the possibility to work with. And at the same time, I think it's also important that we build very specific collaborations with different institutions or academic places for helping us analyzing and getting value out of this data. The technologies nowadays that we use, when we started this, there were many things that we had to build our own, but nowadays there are many libraries. There are many technological applications that we use. And I think in that sense, it's kind of good for us that we don't have to reveal the wheel, right? We can leverage on many different tools and different libraries that people and the community has already built. Like we rely a lot on open source, like most of the things that we use are open source. And I think that's also like something that have leverage on building Grandata.
Today, one of the big fancy words in the artificial intelligence world is deep learning versus features machine learning and so on. If you were to look at your social predictors algorithms, would you define that this fall more in the realm of features machine learning, or you're starting making also wide use of deep learning? And if you're doing that, why?
Feature machine learning, of course, and we are also like our scientists, our experts, the people who are building the models, the people who are building the algorithms. We are relying a lot in the domain knowledge that we have to grasp from the different problems that we are solving for a bank, for the different use cases that we are solving for retailer. But as time progresses, of course, we are also like deep learning algorithms and different technologies. I think since it's not only what we do at Grandata, it's not only the algorithm part or only the data scientist part. We are building here like a product, and we are also like an end-to-end solution that goes from the data to the selling a product. We have to go over all the different processes in the value chain here. So we have like developers, like software engineers developing the product that users at the bank or the retailer end up using for their business needs. We also have like people thinking about the different campaigns, what products they're going to offer, how they're going to offer certain products, all the communication, all the things that you can do because of policy or because of regulations. So there are many different aspects that we have to take into account. And I think eventually maybe you can have like artificial intelligence that it can do it all for you, but still I think we are not in that phase. So we still need a lot of different people involved in the whole process.
Before we go, I just drop one last thing. Where do you think the future is going in terms of this democratization, if you like, of using the data, like getting the data back to people? Do you think we're gonna see the demise of the Facebook of the world and the rise of new type of applications, or do you see that it's gonna be probably both of the two worlds that would coexist today?
I think because of many different things that happen, data will eventually or slowly be going more to the people. The ownership of the data that will go to the people. I think technologies are helping in that, like blockchain technology, I think it's helping in that, and the maturity of blockchain technology is helping in that. I think we are still in the early phases of blockchain technology. There are many things that still have to be solved there, like scalability issues, for instance. Then I think there is a lot of awareness, like people are more aware now to their privacy, to their information. Maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, only few people in this particular area were kind of thinking, okay, Google has all this data from me, or Netflix, and thinking about who has your data. I think more people are getting into aware. And I think another important part is regulations. Like for instance, the GDPR, like Global Data Protection Regulation that came into place in Europe for the European Union in May of this year, I think also has to do with that. So right to be forgotten, like people, like your data. If you want to disappear from the online world, or you want your data to be correct, like many, many different things that are happening, they are kind of converging, in my opinion, that in the future, we are going to be maybe seeing a situation where data goes back to the people. I don't think a lot of the business models will disappear, but probably they will change the way they are doing business today, like big corporations like Google, Facebook. I think there's going to be a change with that.
It has been a great pleasure having you here. So for our audience once more, we have interviewed Martin, who is the CTO of a very interesting startup, Grandata, that does basically a number of econometric predictions based on social data, but also they're building a number of products, including products that give the power of keeping the data back to the consumers. If this is a topic of your interest and you want to expand around this topic, please comment on the comment box below. If you want to hear more of other topics like this, please let me know. And for the time being, thank you, Martin, so much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Paolo, once again for the invitation, and thanks all the audience for watching us.